All right, halfway down 51. She had a fight with a man who says he's her husband, explained the girl at my elbow. I looked around. Most of the remaining women were now having fights with men said to be their husbands. Even Jordan's party, the quartet from East Egg, were rent asunder by dissension. One of the men was talking with curious intensity to a young actress, and his wife, after attempting to laugh at the situation in a dignified and indifferent way, broke down entirely and resorted to flank attacks. At intervals, she appeared suddenly at his side like an angry diamond and hissed, "You promised," into his ear. So he is flirting with a young actress, and his wife is like attacking from the side, like, "Stop, stop. You promised you wouldn't do this at the party." The reluctance to go home was not confined to wayward men. The hall was at present occupied by two deplorably sober men and their highly indignant wives. The wives were sympathizing with each other in slightly raised voices. Whenever he sees them having a good time, he wants to go home. Yeah, I never heard anything so selfish in my life. We're always the first ones to leave. Yes, so are we. Well, we're almost the last tonight, said one of the men sheepishly. The orchestra even left half an hour ago. In spite of this wives' agreement that such malevolence was beyond credibility, the dispute ended in a short struggle, and both wives were lifted, kicking, into the night. As I waited for my hat in the hall, the door of the library opened and Jordan Baker and Gatsby came out together. That's right, they were hanging out upstairs somewhere. He was saying some last word to her, but the eagerness in his manner tightened abruptly into formality as several people approached him to say goodbye. Jordan's party were calling impatiently to her from the porch, but she lingered for a moment to shake hands. "Oh, look at this. I've just heard the most amazing thing," she whispered. "How long were we in there?" "Why, about an hour." "It was simply amazing," she repeated abstractedly. "But I swore I wouldn't tell it, and here I am tantalizing you." She yawned gracefully in my face. Yawned gracefully. Two words. Don't seem to connect. "Please come and see me. Phone book. Under the name Miss Sigourney Howard, my aunt." She was hurrying off as she talked. Her brown hand waved a jaunty salute as she melted into her party at the door. Rather ashamed that on my first appearance I had stayed so late, I joined the last of Gatsby's guests, who were clustered around him. I wanted to explain that I'd hunted for him early in the evening and to apologize for not having known him in the garden. "Oh, don't mention it," he enjoined me eagerly. "Don't give it another thought, old sport." The familiar expression, old sport. The familiar expression held no more familiarity than the hand which reassuringly brushed my shoulder. "And don't forget, we're going up in the hydroplane tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock." So Gatsby's going to take him up in his plane that goes on the water. Then the butler behind his shoulder, "Hey, Philadelphia wants you on the phone, sir." Oh my gosh, interesting, eh? Chicago called, and now Philadelphia is calling. I wonder what Gatsby does. "All right, in a minute. Tell him I'll be right there. Good night." "Good night." "Good night." He smiled, and suddenly there seemed to be pleasant significance in having been among the last to go, as if he had desired it all the time. "Good night, old sport." "Good night." But as I walked down the steps, I saw that the evening was not quite over. 50 feet from the door, a dozen headlights illuminated a bizarre and tumultuous scene. In the ditch beside the road, right side up, but violently shorn of one wheel, so the wheel has fallen off of a car, rested a new coupe, which had left Gatsby's drive not 2 minutes before. The sharp jut of a wall accounted for the detachment of the wheel, which was now getting considerable attention from half a dozen curious chauffeurs. However, as they had left their cars blocking the road, a harsh, discordant din from those in the rear had been audible for some time and added to the already violent confusion of the scene. So a car accident. A man in a long duster had dismounted from the wreck and now stood in the middle of the road, looking from the car to the tire, from the tire to the observers in a pleasant, puzzled way. "See?" he explained it, "wet in the ditch." The fact was infinitely astonishing to him, and I recognized first the unusual quality of wonder, and then the man. It was the late patron of Gatsby's library. It was Owl Eyes. "How did it happen?" He shrugged his shoulders. "I know nothing whatever about mechanics," he said decisively. "Yeah, but how did it happen? Did you run into the wall?" "Don't ask me," said Owl Eyes, washing his hands of the whole matter. "I know very little about driving, next to nothing. It happened, and that's all I know." "Well, if you're a poor driver, you oughtn't to try driving at night. And you've also been drunk for a week, by the way." "But I wasn't even trying," he explained indignantly. "I wasn't even trying." An